Hello, nonverbal communication students. It's Dr. Ivy covering Chapter 12. This is Part 3. And this section is on nonverbal cues and sexuality. Woohoo! Okay, so we're gonna work through it as best we can. And this is a lot of things that you don't typically hear in a college classroom. You do if you take my courses because I always cover it. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge the sexual aspect of our being. So we're on page 448, and there are some definitions of sexuality, and there are some terms in these first couple of pages, and I just want to highlight them for you. There's a dictionary of sexuality, a dictionary definition of sexuality, the state of being sexual, involvement or interest in sexual activity. Third definition is sexual appeal or potency. But sexuality is a very complicated thing to define. So take a look at that. I do mention a couple of researchers to you on top page 449, Shibley, Hyde, and De La Mater, who emphasize outer course. Think that we should talk about something called outer course and not just intercourse. A version of sexuality that includes thoughts, emotions, psychological factors, one's identity, and all kinds of cultural factors. And so take a look at that. That's a term that you may not have heard. There are lots of nonverbal cues associated with sexuality, as you can imagine. Appearance, attractiveness are connected to it. There are other kinds of things. We reveal our sexuality through our facial expressions, through our voices. And the sounds that our voices can produce. We certainly reveal it through touch, affection, touch, bodily connection to others. Of course we do. Other things like proxemics, spacing between individuals, and also kinesics, walk, movement, stance, positioning. All of those things are important nonverbal cues. And there are things that at your disposal as to how you convey or communicate your sexuality. I think it's important to stop for a second and just say this. Whether or not you are fully aware of your own sexuality, and we're all evolving, right? There are nonverbal cues that you convey connected to your sexuality. Now, one caveat, I also teach gender communication, and I teach a course called Communication and Sexuality, and so I just got to say this one thing to make sure everybody knows. There are individuals in our culture, and probably every culture around the world, who view themselves as asexual. Asexual persons do not have sexual attraction toward anybody ever. And you may not be aware of that, you may not know that, but there are persons who view themselves as asexual. They do not have sexual attraction to anybody. They may have sexual relationships. They function sexually, but they are not sexually attracted to other persons. Sometimes they call themselves ace, A-C-E, or A-S-E. And there's a lot more research about these individuals than there used to be. So let's not assume that everyone has sexual relations or sexual connections with others. Just got to put that in there because that's the thing that I teach, and it's important, and we want to be as inclusive as possible with everyone. So I am talking about sexual individuals here in this chapter, the nonverbal cues connected with one's sexuality. Take a look at what we talk about in terms of bisexuality. There's becoming more research on bisexuality. Sometimes it's been kind of hard to find. There's probably more research on transgender persons. And so that's been a little bit easier to access than on bisexuality. I'm not really sure why that is, but it has been difficult. Some people say it's because if you are bisexual, once you choose, okay, I'm going to be in a sexual relationship with a same-sex person, well, now you're in a homosexual or a gay relationship. If you decide as a bisexual, okay, I'm attracted to men and women equally, and you are in a other sex, a heterosexual connection, a male-female connection, then you're heterosexual. So go over there and look at that research. So it's just kind of an odd thing that exists. And so we're trying to learn more about bisexuality, but it has been difficult to find research on that. On page 450, we talk about gaydar. I don't know if you've heard about gaydar. I first heard about gaydar when I was a college student a few decades ago, an undergrad. I was like, what the heck is gaydar? And it's based on the word radar, right? Gaydar, a lot of people say is still around, is still a thing. Gaydar began as a protection for people who were gay or lesbian. It began as a way of processing, particularly nonverbal cues, to find out if someone was like you and if you were safe with that person. We still know that homophobia, homo-hatred is still a thing. We know there is such thing as hate crimes, hate violence. We know that homosexual individuals, as well as transgender and bi individuals, are discriminated against. And so there's still a lot of attitude out there, even though we have liberalized a lot of our views, and a lot more of us have gay and straight friends and trans friends and bi friends. So these things are changing, and they have changed. Has gaydar outlived its utility? Did gaydar become co-opted by the straight community? So people who were straight and possibly homophobic, having a fear of being labeled a homosexual, or also a fear of homosexual persons. There's a couple of different definitions of homophobia. But was gaydar something that straights could use to decide or to figure out whether somebody was gay or not? And so it got co-opted in some ways and turned around to be something that possibly could allow someone to discriminate or to separate themselves from gay persons. I don't know if gaydar is a utility anymore. I don't know if it's useful. I don't know if it's a thing. I think so many people know so many more people and have family members and coworkers and friends who are openly gay. And so this may be really a thing of the past, but just know gaydar is primarily nonverbal. And so it's things that you process about a person that give you clues as to that person's sexual orientation. Just beware the discriminatory uses of gaydar. Is gaydar designed to link people together and connect them because they sense similarity in between themselves and others? Or is it a way to identify difference and therefore discriminate or push oneself away from others who are diverse? A lot of questions about that, a lot of things for you to consider. But take a look at that section, and I'm going to bring that to a close and get to part 4 on chapter 12, which is some really tough stuff to talk about, but it's super important. Okay? All right, signing off for now. See you in a bit.